right. Next up, we have Student Wellness and Success Funds and Disadvantaged Pupil Impact Aid Plan. And Ms. Marshall,
Yes.
take it away.
Thank you, President Davidson and members of the board. So this is our second Student Wellness and Success Plan Disadvantaged Pupil Impact Aid report to the board. We did one last school year as well. I want to make sure that I'm very clear that this is not new funding to the school district. This is a new requirement that the state has placed on us around funding. So what we have for this year, our Student Wellness and Success Funds are estimated for fiscal year 2025, which is our current fiscal year, to be about $1.2 million. I'd like to note that last year it was about 1.4 million. So we are seeing quite a decrease to that funding this year as the state continues to shift that burden to our local community. And then our DPIA funds is estimated to be $1 million, and it is also decreased by about $12,000 this year in total. And then our other state or local funds, so that's what we spend outside of that state funding that comes through the state foundation plan, and that's estimated at $2.3 million for fiscal year 2025. And so this funding has it's not new funding. It hasn't been new funding, but it was part of the state foundation funding. And as the formula changes, it's now considered restricted funding within that. So not new funding, but new strings attached to the funding along with the reporting requirements. And so I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director of Student Services, Tammy Santa, and our Executive Director of Elementary School, Cheryl Relford, and our Director of Assessment and Alternative Education, Nick McElwain, to tell you what these funds are spent on.
Thank you. Good evening, President Meyer, members of the board, Superintendent Hamburg, and thank you for that opening, Ms. Marshall. I'm going to lead us off and cover the student wellness and success part, while Cheryl and Nick will cover the disadvantaged pupil impact aid portion. So as you see on this one-pager, all of these funds require a collaborative effort from two places. One is a community provider from an approved list, which we select the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. The other one will come from a community mental health provider, which we select Concord Counseling Services. Both of these providers we've used. This isn't the first time using them. We have longstanding partnerships with them. So those are the ones that we've selected for these dollars. So as you work your way down on the student wellness and success dollars, our focus continues to be the same. It's on two main areas. That is on our mental health services and our clinic services, which I am honored to support both of those buckets. And within those areas, we focused on really specific things. So under mental health, we're really looking at regulation skills when it comes to our students. And then when you pop over to the clinic side, we're looking at managing chronic conditions, as well as really trying to get a clear picture on the traffic in our clinics. And so what I think is really important to know is if you take both of these areas, right, medical conditions and clinical social work, those look very different in a private setting. So when we bring them into a school setting, then we're really focused and concentrating those services on getting students back into class. So it just looks very different than it would in a private setting. We're seeing a lot of success. We continue to monitor and measure impact on both of these buckets on a regular basis. There's lots of ways we gather this data. So that is through our panorama data, mental health kind of tracking sheets, I would say sign-ins into our counseling offices, as well as our school care data, which is the platform we use for the clinics. We're in our second year of using that. It's been tremendous. So overall, from this side of student wellness and success, we're seeing continued impact in both areas. I think what's also important to note is, like other sides of the house, this is more of a non-academic side, but we now have data-driven decisions we're able to consistently make when that comes to PD for these staff members, when that comes to staffing and what that looks like each year. So, this is really helping us make some thoughtful decisions in this area. So that is the summary for student wellness and success. Happy to take any questions before handing it to Cheryl.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. So I oversee the area of reading intervention. That's what we use this funding primarily to provide, targeted, skill-based, small group reading intervention. And students who receive reading intervention receive this intervention on top of their core reading instruction that is delivered by the classroom teacher. So they are taught like all other peers in their grade level classrooms. The teacher provides high quality instruction with some interventions within the classroom. And then students are pulled for reading intervention. And on top of that, based upon their area of need, all students who receive reading intervention are students who are performing below grade level. I want to make sure that I share that piece. And they're on a reading improvement and monitoring plan. We progress monitor the skills that they're being taught, and we want to ensure that they're able to learn the skills in the classroom and in intervention so that they can apply the skills and show that they are working towards mastery. We are currently servicing about 20% of our students receive a reading intervention across the district K through 5. And we provide ongoing progress monitoring around if it's working or not, and we will make the necessary adjustments if we need to ensure that we're meeting the kids where they are. We are using 2 intervention programs right now, and that's Spire and Sound Sensible, and both of those programs are on the reading intervention approved list for the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, and they are totally aligned with the science of reading. I did share that we do work to monitor our students' progress on the interventions that we're providing. We do have data that shows that kids who receive the reading intervention on top of core reading instruction do show growth in those foundational literacy skills. And so far, it's working, but the needs of our kids have grown. Any questions for reading intervention?
So those 2 programs, are they both online programs?
No, they are not. So those are the 2 programs that our reading teachers use to provide the skill-based instruction that's provided in person during the school day, where they pull students out of the classroom for small group instruction.
Okay. So it's one-on-one.
Not one-on-one.
Small group, sorry.
Small group.
Yeah.
And that small group could be as few as 3 up to 5 students in a group.
Okay.
And there was a mention of a slight reduction in funding. Are these, the amount of money that we're getting from the state and potential feds, does this cover the whole program?
So for reading intervention right now, I would probably say it covers that funding, but we are in a situation right now with some new legislation where we have to identify a new reading program K2, and that will be additional funding required for that new mandate from the state.
Thank you.
I would say in addition to that, what does concern me, it's the kids that are just treading water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably working really hard, but if they had a little bit more help, it wouldn't be so hard. So it would be nice if we did have extra funds
It would be.
to help them too, because they need it too. So, a dream.
Yes, hopefully it'll come true. Any other questions?
Just real quick before you step away from the podium. So you mentioned that K2 piece that came down from the state. So if you haven't been paying attention, the great state of Ohio does require that we follow the science of reading for our reading programs. And so that's why we need a new program for our K-12, because that didn't quite meet the standard that's been set by the state. And the state has created an approved vendor list for those programs, right? And the one that we're currently working with isn't on that list somewhere.
So there's a portion of our reading program that is not on the approved list, and then there's another side where we are. So we are very fortunate that we were forward-thinking and proactive with when we picked our original reading programs that we're currently using for grades, all grades. But our grades 3 through 5, we already have Wit and Wisdom as our core reading program, and that program is on the approved list. Our K-2 reading program was not a complete core reading program, and their foundations is on the approved list, but we will have to identify a core reading program, and we are exploring which ones that are on that approved list to consider. Curriculum is very expensive. I don't know how else to say it. When we do an adoption of any program, K-5, I can only speak in my world of elementary, it could cost upward of $1 million, and that would be K-5. Now, with this current mandate, we have to purchase a program, and that means core, all pieces and parts of the reading program. So we're anticipating it may cost anywhere from $500 to, it just depends, because all of the pieces, it could be upward of $500,000. And the state has not designated any funding to cover those costs.
That also does not include the professional development that will be necessary for that new curriculum.
It does not.
I think it's worth noting that, so there's no misunderstanding, that even though what we currently use, part of what we currently use is not on the approved list from the state, that shouldn't be interpreted that we were using a failing reading program. We were using a reading program that was working for the needs that we had under prior legislation. With the change in the legislation and the change in what the state of Ohio has decided we will teach, this is a significant unfunded mandate. And in addition to the cost for the curriculum and the cost for the professional development, there is also this significant emotional cost for staff members who are deeply committed to the way that they have taught and effectively utilized the other ways of teaching reading that there are. I'm not saying science of reading is wrong. I am saying that there are massive costs to this sort of change, and it's important that people understand the depth of those costs.
And I appreciate you outlining it in that way. So imagine being on the forefront trying to convince our teachers that this is the way that we need to go, and it is not always well received. We have worked diligently across our elementary team to support our teachers and provide a system of consistent support and alignment, but it is difficult when you are, and I hate to use the word force, but we are mandated to change our practice. But the good news is we were watching and anticipating, and so we started our work. I've been in the district office 5 years. We started this work probably 6 or 7 years ago. And so the good news is it's not great that the mandates have come in the frequency that they've come and with a quick turnaround time. But we were in a better position than other districts because of the work that we had previously done. All of our teachers are required to do the science of reading training this school year, and so that's been a huge undertaking. And then if you weren't aware, last year we had to do dyslexia training. And so there have been, when we talk about the legislation that's being presented, it's really important that we understand the implications of those decisions, because when decisions are made within a year, it is a huge lift for us as a larger district to make those things work in an effective and efficient way, especially without funding.
You mentioned time. So when do we need to have this implemented?
So again, a decision was made where we have to make a decision regarding the core reading program for K-2. We have to decide by the middle of the year what program we're going to utilize, and we've already requested that we allocated the funding in our current budgets, and then we have to implement a portion of the program by the end of the school year. And so what we've promised our teachers so that they know what to anticipate, sometimes we can tell them in advance and sometimes we can't, But this year, because we knew it was coming, we've assured them that we are not asking them to implement anything new until the second semester. So we'll dig in and continue to do our homework and make the best choice that aligns with our core beliefs for literacy instruction in our district, that aligns to the state mandate, while supporting our teachers through the process.
Thank you. I have one last question. You mentioned cost, right? We know that we're not buying, per se, new textbooks every couple of years. Is there additional costs to keep up with that? Like, do you have to renew license every so often? Those types of things. I mean, people want to get paid, and now that we're online, they're finding new ways to do that, right?
Yeah. So we build that into whatever we adopt. We include those costs for licenses and things of that nature. But sometimes vendors change their products. And so I'm going to give you an example. We've been using Bridges Math for the past, I think, 7 years. Please don't quote me if that year is wrong, but the vendor just changed all of the programming. And so we have now what is viewed as an outdated program, and that program is up for review. And so we do have a curriculum adoption and review process where we pull a committee of teachers together to review our programs and resources and determine what adjustments we need to make. And we try to make good decisions so that we're using the taxpayer dollar in a very efficient and effective way, but the cost of purchasing hands-on, evidence-based programs for elementary use can be very costly.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the work that the second grade teachers are going to do to get this done.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I do have a question for you. You had mentioned that about 20% of the K through 5 students in the district need some kind of reading intervention. How many intervention specialists for reading do we have in the district, and is that an adequate number?
So last year, I'll say we have about 32 reading intervention teachers in our district. And those positions are funded from title funding and general fund. Last year, we did have to add a 0.5 additional reading intervention teacher to cover the need. And for the current year, that FTE that we added, so we ended up with 32.5, I think it is. We have enough to cover the student need as of today. I want to acknowledge that the needs do vary year to year depending upon where our students come in and what level of support that we provide. But we do a good job here in Westerville where we focus on that core reading instruction in the classroom first. Our classroom teachers then are providing some targeted intervention within the classroom, and then reading intervention is done, as I mentioned earlier, on top of that core instruction to ensure that we have crossed every T and dotted every I and are creating a true system of support for every student to experience some level of success. Now, I wish I could say that every child by the end of their first year is on grade level, but we're not there yet. And so some students will need that level of support for several years before they get to a place where they're able to function within grade level.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just real quick, you mentioned that there was no additional funding that came from the state for implementing this curriculum specifically. I just want to note that our state funding for the fiscal year 2025, which is the year that we have to at least partially implement this, has been cut by the state by over $4 million.
Yes.
So no additional funds for this, but overall we're seeing a huge decrease in our state funding. Our state share decreased by about 7% with the calculations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Nick McElwain.
Thank you, Cheryl. We are so blessed and thankful in Westerville City Schools to be able to offer our at-risk students an alternative to earn credits or an option instead of dropping out of high school through our Educational Options for Success or our EOS program. Not only does our program work with students on their educational needs, but we also work with our students on their social emotional needs as well. This has never been more paramount since coming out of COVID and the pandemic. Typically at the EOS program, we would work with those upperclassmen students that were behind on credits or were off track to graduation. But coming out of the pandemic, we have seen the rise in the social emotional needs of our students as well. So now we're working as well with those underclassmen students who are struggling with the anxiety, with the depression, just the noise that kind of goes on in the school, helping them and getting them at an earlier age to try to get them back on track to where we can earn some credits, we can get some momentum build up, and then possibly look at going back into their home buildings for a half day, or possibly as they get to their senior year, maybe transitioning back into the building for the entire day. So we've really had to shift our focus coming out of the pandemic due to those elevated needs. Typically, our program will work with about 150 students. We were a little over 160 students that we impacted last year and gave them an option to earn credits and stay within the Westerville City Schools. On average, we account for about 10% of our Westerville City Schools graduates every year. And our credit numbers have ballooned these past couple years with working with these younger students and getting them in at a younger age. Typically, on average, we're around 450 credits earned each year within our program with all of our students that we work with. But last year, we were over 500 credits. We were at 505. And the year before that, we were at 520. So 2 years straight, we have achieved over 500 credits with our students within our program, which is amazing that we're really helping them with their educational needs. But once again, that social emotional piece and working with kids, we also track that within our program as well. A lot of our students that come in, we know that they have had maybe some negative feelings or some negative interactions within school, and maybe school has kind of been a friction point with them and their families. When students come into our program, they take a social emotional survey that was put together and coordinated with our mental health team. And we see when they come into our program, what are they thinking with the schooling? What have been their experiences? What are their thoughts? What are their feelings? And then as they progress through our program and as they exit our program, we give them a survey again. And we take a look at those results and we compare. Did they have an increase in positive feelings towards school? Did they have a decrease in those negative feelings with school? And last year, 92% of our students that exited had a positive increase with their feelings and their attitudes and how they interacted with people at school, while 89% of the students that exited had a decrease in those negative feelings and that negative impact at school. So not only are we moving the needle with the educational piece, but also with that social emotional piece, we're really making some great strides with our students. We'll continue to look at our graduate numbers each year. We'll continue to look at our credit attainment numbers each year. We'll continue to look at our social emotional results to make sure that we are supporting the entire student. And we are very thankful to be able to use some of these funds to be able to impact our students in a positive way. I will gladly take any questions before I turn it over to Nicole for some final thoughts.
Any questions?
No question.
Thank you. Thanks for all the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Nicole, any final thoughts?
No, I think you guys did a great job. I do want to mention, because I got a text message, there is a reimbursement for a stipend to pay some teachers for the science of reading training that they have to go through, which is separate from our curriculum piece and implementing the curriculum for elementary schools, right?
That is correct.
Yes. Okay. So it's a very
If I
small
could-
stipend.
If I could add that the district has to compensate the teachers and seek reimbursement
Yes.
for those stipends.
Yes. And I'm assuming help find ways to provide that professional development to our teachers as well,
Yes.
so. So nothing new to add, just a reminder that, again, not new money, just new strings and reporting requirements. And this is good work that I think our district has been doing for a very, very long time. I know as the state has focused funding, it shifts policy and focus sometimes, but I think we've done a great job working in the mental health space, the reading intervention space, and the alternative and assessment space. So, but thank you all for the work that you do every day and your teams and just all the good people that are doing this to make sure kids get what they need. So I appreciate you.